What if the difference between good design and great design didn't have anything to do with how the design looked, but rather if it connected with people and motivated them to act? And you know what? That sounds an awful lot like what we want stories to do. So does that mean good design equals good storytelling? Well, luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where filmmaking, brand, and business all collide. My name is Bennett, a filmmaker and an author, and for over 2 decades, I've studied how stories actually work on the screen, inside organizations, and most importantly, out in the real world. So each episode, I host one of the world's greatest storytellers to help break down the art and science of storytelling as a system, not just a skill. That means how stories create connection, how they move people emotionally, and ultimately, how they drive action. So if you want to learn to tell stories that do more than just sound good, but they actually achieve something, then this, dear storyteller, is the show for you. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. This is episode 219, and today my guest is Shane Lukas. Shane is the founder of A Great Idea. He's a longtime designer, he's an activist, and honestly, one of the clearest thinkers that I have come across when it comes to the intersection of design, storytelling, and brand advocacy. Now, quick side story, Shane and I actually met in 2018, maybe 2019, in one of my first storytelling workshops, which was at the Create Good conference here in Durham, North Carolina, and it was a nonprofit conference, and Shane attended my workshop, and I don't know that he knew at the time, but I think that was my first long, it was 3 hours interactive workshop, and he had such wonderful things to say, such great feedback. It really connected with him, and we haven't talked much over the years, but we stayed connected on LinkedIn, and now we got the chance to have Shane on the show and reconnect again, and I'm so glad that we did, because in those 5 or 6 years since then, had no idea how aligned we were in the work that we did in the storytelling space, but coming at it from different angles or different perspectives. He from the design world and me from the more direct storytelling world. But here's the beautiful thing about it. Stories and storytelling is embedded in anything, in all communication, in all engagement, in all connection. I would argue storytelling is at the root. So yes, we specifically talk about design and his work, but we really are talking about storytelling, and that's generally what happens in every episode. The most important thing, however, in this episode is our conversation around brand advocacy. This is why you want to use storytelling as a long-term strategy, as a system in your business, and not just a way to talk about your products or your services. What I mean by that more specifically is when you use storytelling as a strategy, you create deep, meaningful connections and relationships with your brand advocates. And those are people who are like your super fans. They're not just your early adopters, but your loyalists, the people, your evangelists, the people who will go on and tell everybody else about your brand. They are the ones who are actually co-authoring the story with you. That's why that relationship is so tight, and that's why it must be reciprocal. It's a give and take, like the foundation and the basis of any good and strong relationship. So Shane actually got into design through the world of journalism. So see, story is embedded in every thought that he has and every decision that he makes, and it informs how he represents himself, his brand, of course, the values that they stand for, the designs that they create, and how they show up in the world. This is exactly what I want you to understand out of this whole podcast, is how you do what you do, in this case, design, a design agency, differently than anyone else in your space, and why, when you understand that, you understand why, and your audience understands why they would come to you over someone else. It's not competition, it's alignment. And when you clearly understand and articulate your story, that is how you achieve alignment, my friends. So here's my conversation with Shane Lukas, and I hope that you love it. Shane, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here. Thank you so much, Ray.
Absolutely. It's been a long time coming. We met, if you calculate it, I think it was 6 years ago.
6 whole years.
Who's counting though?
That's like what is that? A bunch of series of British Bake Offs. That's at least. I'm counting time at our household right now in British Bake Offs.
I love it. I love it. That's a good metric. How can I do mine? I don't know. Soccer games. That's where my current life is at. Not mine anymore. Not mine, Shane. I've been I've been kicked off. It's now all attention goes to the younger generation for some reason. So
That makes sense. And as a young soccer player, we appreciate that, and we appreciate both the epic wins and the epic fails of our soccer
it's
experiences.
a life lesson, baby.
It is a life lesson. What was I, a fullback, right? Is that what they're called? Is that
Yeah,
what
in the back. Yeah.
Yes. I'm scratching the back of the brain for that one because
Saving the goals.
I'm still uncoordinated. So I admire any parent who's out there, encouraging young people to be out there and figure out how that body works, and then fall on your face and hit that mud more than once. That's
but also trying to grow new artists as well. So I really love to see them navigate with the kid. Like they're interested in so many different things. It's kind of beautiful to watch. And then I don't know. I just try to support however I can.
Problem solving. I love it. That's pretty much what it is.
Absolutely. But today we'll talk about probably some similar themes, but definitely creating art. I just want to jump into one of the first things that I saw when looking you up, as if I didn't already know you and your work. You had this quote one place, I forget where it was, that said, "Good design connects people." That jumped out at me because I say almost verbatim the same thing. Stories connect people. So if this is the like A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C equation, is design just storytelling?
Design is storytelling. I mean, it's always been storytelling, right? Because you're trying to communicate using visual images via the narrative that's in there. And, what I mean by good design is that it actually connects the people to that narrative, to that story. So they're able to see something, they're able to see its purpose, its intention, right? On its base level. To me, that's the difference between good design and great design. So great design is going to actually inspire them to engage, to act, right? To take it to the next level. But good design is the one that says, hey, if that's a stop sign and you stop, good design. Worked really well, did all the things you needed it to do, right? It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be ornate. It doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to make sure that, like, if you are, I don't know, not stepping on the subway, past the line that gets you to a place where you're going to get hit by a subway train, win. That's a good design. Like, they have figured out how to help people not hurt themselves in this process. That's good design, right? If I know where to go to find the restroom, if I know where to go to find the entrance and exit, good design. Great design is where you're like, wow, it's either sometimes seamless. So sometimes great design is seamless, like in UI or UX. Sometimes it's just inspiring and compelling. And it's like, hey, that's an image I had not really thought of before, or that's going to stick with me for a bit, or it lets me reflect on what I'm thinking about in this story. So if I see something around, say, climate change, like, there's one thing to just tell me climate change happens, right? And maybe some basic facts, and that's great. That's good design. That's good storytelling. Great storytelling is, I see not only myself in that, but I see something I can do. I see some way I can change the world. And that, to me, is what we aspire to every day, is really like getting from good to great, right? We set good as a base level, and then great design, right? Great design not just connects people, but it actually inspires and it brings them into a space of action.
Coming in hot. What a perfect answer. You all do a ton of different types of design, it seems like. I'm always interested in that. It's like, do you ever feel spread thin, or what is the thing that unifies it all? Because you serve people in a variety of manners, all within kind of the design space. How do you keep that cohesive so it doesn't feel like you're splintered, but it is like, this is our brand, this is what we do, with so many service options?
I mean, it's a great question, because in the current world where we're talking about so many boutique agencies, so many solopreneur outfits, so many structures, right? It's an everything to everybody model, right? For a lot of folks. And I think what I've been lucky to experience, especially as we turn 10 years and we've been able to celebrate 10 years, is two things. One, as an individual, I like to have the versatility. I'm always interested in new technologies, new approaches. And basic design, good design theory, applies universally. Like, if you are approaching, whether that's a bus wrap or a poster campaign or a digital media strategy, whatever the case is, good design means you are effectively communicating. And that is really applicable across all the channels. The software will change, the media may change. But if you are unsuccessful at communicating your message, you're not good at what you do. And so, so that versatility as a designer is something I love. As a business, It's more thinking about what are the places we want to carve our space in this landscape. How do we best honor and really elevate the work that our partners are doing? And in our case, because we're so focused on purpose-driven partners, but for-profit and nonprofit partners, healthcare, education, and nonprofit, we're really interested in making sure that they're successful. Because when they're successful, we're all successful. But that's our niche, that's our area. So in that way, we want to make sure the skills we sort of bring to the table all align to that. Within that, as a business model, we also can't do everything. We are not. We don't have the budget of Nike. We don't have that. Like because we're also working with organizations that really span the gamut on what their spending ability is. So, and that is important to us. That fits within our value system to make sure that we have this broad range. So there are certain things we don't do. Certain things we have carved out, like we don't do paid SEO, for example. Like there are firms that specialize in those spaces, and we say, well, it's not really us. It's not also design. It is strategy. So I don't want to exclude it from the conversation. And when we do have conversations, we include it. But we're like, that's not really about brand deployment. That's not really about brand design so much as the strategic, I guess you could call it deployment, but it's kind of more the strategic element of how getting that and distributed into the partners and potential advocates. So we want to consider it, but we really focus on what the brand is and what the brand storytelling is. And then we help our partners if there are things outside of us that, they want to work with other partners. We're not. We love collaboration. Again, why we've been here for 10 years is we have a great reputation as collaborators, and we want to keep that.
And am I correct in assuming that there's also some part of it where the different elements of design like overlap and connect to one another, and therefore, like if you're serving a client, it makes a lot of sense for you to be able to continue to hold their hand and walk them through that whole process, because it's not just like, hey, let's create our website or our logo or whatever, but they should filter down to all of the elements of a brand's design. Is that fair?
Absolutely. It's a landscape, right? Like think about your own usage, right? You don't encounter a brand once. And if you do, you probably forgot it. The likelihood is that you experience it through varying channels, your email channels, your social channels, your print, your collateral. I thought print would go away, right? Like many people did. I've been lucky in my career is 30 years. So I've been able to, and I started really with digital revolution. So I started in the .com spaces with a lot of design pieces. Actually, I started technically DIY posters for like nonprofits and stuff like that when I was doing activism. And so like, that's where actually my design career kicked off.
That's cool.
And so I started like, because nobody else is going to do a poster and you don't have a budget for a poster. So you're like, I'm making posters. And then people were like, can you make my poster? And I was like, I'll make your poster. And then we did like, then the internet happened. And I was like, do you want to make a little mini site? Sure, absolutely. And so then I started with like drugstore.com. Drugstore.com, which was an Amazon property, then over to monster.com. And then from there, I picked up more print because I ended up running several magazines in New York, in travel magazines. But all in content, my focus was always content and the storytelling behind it. And so I actually came to design not as somebody who studied design, I actually studied journalism. And so for me, the storytelling was always integral to that part of the conversation. So when it came to doing the visual conveyance of those messages, when I started to share them, I understood that, again, if people did not understand what I was sharing, it might be pretty. And believe me, there is some beautiful design out there. I love a good design manual where I'm like, so abstract, so pretty, so not going to do any of the things that I have to do on a given daily basis. And I love it. And I think that it's great that design schools are like, hey, can you make your name into a giraffe? And it's like, that's amazing. I didn't get to do that. I'm jealous a little bit because I was too busy like doing news reporting and stuff like that. But what I found when I work with young people and I go to schools is like, well, but can you put 200 words on the back of this 4x6 card and make it work? Like, can you face the challenges we get in a given daily basis in order to make design work? And that to me is a really big to me, that's a passion. It's that problem solving passion that I have to really convey something that inspires them toward action. So so to me, I guess I think about the design landscape is that they're all problems, they're all challenges that we have to approach, and just the media determines what those parameters look like. And so everybody wants to shove everything into an email. Bad idea. Email is still better than social media in terms of communicating. And so we do a lot of emails. And so we talk with people about like, can you bring it down? Can you focus those conversations? Like things like that. So that's, those are emails. But a website, everybody's like, if I build it, they will come, right? If I build a website, everybody's going to, no, like people are going to look at, you don't go to a site. Okay, anybody listening to this, tell me, Other than eBay, Netflix, Amazon, any of the sort of we would consider the commercial, like big sites, right? The big sites. How often do you go to, even if you care about them? Like I care a great deal about music, but I don't go to a lot of non-purchasing store sites very often of the artists that I love, right?
Mhm.
I may go check out if they have one new video, then I might go check it out, right? And then I will never go to it again. If I'm working with a nonprofit, I go to that site typically once, maybe up to 3 times, oftentimes just to evaluate, like, are they for real? Are you are you
Totally.
something that connects to me? And then I'm basically going to be like, can I sign on to your newsletter, which is a better method of communication? I might follow them on social media, depending on how good that fits into my feed. Although, again, in a pay to play model, because all social media platforms are companies. So they're, you may not always get the information there. So that's why email is a little bit more effective. And then I will engage with them, like go to their events if they're local or something like that. I'll try to pay attention, get on their mailing list and start to stay a community that way. And so when we're doing design, we're not, I don't think of it ever as a single touch point. It always has to be these multiple touch points. It always has to be this landscape of things. And then you're always problem solving for the media that you're in and making sure that you're telling that story consistently, which I love because, again, you just got to get there. And like, people want that. They're like, I want to understand you because I get it. And now I want to see you in my story, my personal story.
Mm.
And that's where we want to fit it.
So good. I did not know this about you. This makes so much sense that you have a journalistic background. I know you've been doing design for a long time, but yeah, that really clicks. Sticking with the design aspect of it, because you do so much and you cover this landscape, as you said, I'm just curious. And now I know a little bit about how you got your start with the activism posters, which I love that story. What part of the design process or what designs that you help, collaborate on or create, where are you most fulfilled? Like, where do you love to spend your time? And this could be just like what lights your heart on fire, or it could be like, this is the big domino that knocks down the other dominoes. But in terms of professionally, the work that you do in design, what's the space where you really love to spend time?
Oh, it's an interesting question because I think there's always a joy, albeit probably a little dopamine rush,
Mm.
I assume, when you see other people interacting with the work you've done
Ooh.
and they're like, wow, or can
Yeah.
I have a copy of that poster? There was a project we did, we're really proud of. We got an Anthem Award for it last year for Seattle Public Utilities out in Seattle. Makes sense. Amazing. Again, they were doing an amazing initiative. It continues on now, actually part of a continuing part of that initiative, where they all kind of came together to think about ways they wanted to envision the future. And they wanted to envision inclusion and the rethinking of conflict management within their organization,
Huh.
and rethinking of it in a way that felt more equitable, more inclusive, really focusing on many of the values we certainly share. So it was a good alignment for us, and it was with our partner Be Possible, who does incredible work out there in Seattle. And we created these visual stands that had like blocks and tiles created by each of these different teams that were tackling a different component of these basically envisioning forward model. And so they were going into their own experiences, their own sense about what it meant to be in a safe, not just safe space, courageous space, a brave space, what it meant to be considering a multiplicity of identities within the same area, how to handle the humanity that people bring into the room. And so it was so exciting to put these, and there were, I want to say 12 of them. So 12 of these towers. And then they put them in these sort of public spaces for all of their teams to see and experience. And so it was, from a design perspective, it was like trying to make sure that people who were not part of this process, who were not part of going through these workshops, could approach them and understand them and then take something from it into their daily life to say, I really love this. It speaks to me because I understand what it's like to not be heard. I understand what it's like to not be seen. And to be in that moment, to be like, these are different ways other people have that same experience. And I'm really excited about also the solutions that we're seeing here too. And that to me is really powerful as a designer, is we want to see transformational change. That's what we're built on. Like a great idea is fundamentally built from an activist base where we want to see transformational change. And whether those are in healthcare spaces, education, or nonprofit spaces, we believe the world is better when our clients do better. And when our clients do better, that means that they're essentially out like connecting with people and encouraging them to change things. So if they show up at an event and they're like, this brochure rocks, or I love this poster, or like, I want to share this piece of media, then I'm like, dopamine, give me the dopamine rush. And it's a little dance party, and I'm all here for that. Like I'm all here.
I love that so much. It's always interesting to me. I'm always fascinated with companies or organizations that you might not think would lead with these types of values, like a public utilities company. Like I have a client in Eastern North Carolina that's an electric company, electric co-op, and they lead with this brand philosophy and these values that, and this might be an unfair, judgment on my part, but that, people that we in the nonprofit space, you would expect, we met at Create Good conference, everybody there, purpose-driven organizations, B Corps, etc. But like a public utilities company, and maybe this is my naivete, I just wouldn't assume that they would do that. So I'm always very impressed and proud in a way that like, hey, you guys like are really coming with a vision and a mission and values. That's beautiful. I love that. There should be more of that. So that's really cool. What a great gig, especially.
You're speaking right into the book I'm finishing up right now, which should be on the shelves in 2026.
And
really focusing on the advocate advantage, really focusing on what it means that companies. So what I've learned as a small business person and really coming to capitalism very reluctantly. So I got my MBA, and I feel like very reluctant capitalist because I really wasn't aware of other models of capitalism. And so things like B Corps are great. Conscious capitalism is another philosophy that doesn't require the same sort of B Corp certification, but really thinking about how you approach conscious capitalism. So when building the company, in this company, we put 5% of everything we make goes back into civic engagement models and civic engagement initiatives, be that everything from sponsorships to right now we have, for example, an ideation grant that we're going to be putting out $10,000 to 10 different activists on the ground doing incredible work around the country. And we're really proud of things like that. And those are things that, we believe in doing all the time. I think for-profit companies, and I just spoke at a retail conference in LA, really talking about what it means to look at the business motivations to do good things. That there are opportunities to look at the way you operate the business, I think are sometimes natural fears. And I think that is, and again, as a business owner and as somebody who's worked for companies and as just a human being, we are all experience fear and discomfort at different points. And our natural reaction is to like essentially close in, to become much more insular in our thinking and to close it down. When reality shows there's a lot more stability and a lot more building and a lot more thriving that can happen when you actually expand that tent, when you actually expand those conversations, when you build meaningful and authentic engagements with people, then they're willing to stick with you. Those communities are willing to stick with you. If you're a small company like doing baked goods in the middle of whatever and you are struggling, like your community can be a big part of that conversation if you're willing to open that conversation and say like, we are looking to build this together. There are different ways and methods that companies can display that and do it in a meaningful way. And I think that's the challenge sometimes, is the performativity versus what is kind of baked into the organization and the work, and committing to that model in a way that the business still has to be smart. It still has to function. Like again, this is where my conscious capitalism comes in. Still has to work in this system. And we could talk about capitalism separately. That's a whole different conversation. But within this system, it still has to function.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you can start to think strategically about like, well, how do we sustain it in such a way that it aligns to a value system that makes both practical sense and also aligns to the people we want to be, the way we want to be in this world. And I think that to me is where we get a lot of our for-profit partners certainly come to us. They know who we are and they know we're good at advocacy building. And that's what we focus on.
Dude, you're nailing it. By the way, what's the title of the book? Or you have
The Advocate Advantage.
The Advocate Advantage. And you said next year?
As next year.
That's awesome.
It's scary. It's my first business book. It's very scary. It's like I have such an activist at base, and what I've learned in sort of maturing as an activist is that my role within the community changes, right? The opportunities here change. And my goal, my hope is to not only make it more possible for young people to enact their visions, because they're the ones who are leading this pathway forward, but then as somebody who has now, more experience, more resource, all that kind of stuff. How do I participate in laying that and helping them build that foundation, right? Like, how do I do that? How do I contribute in that way without leading?
Hmm.
Like, it's kind of a mix, right? Like, it's how
Yep.
do I bring that into the mix, but also not own it, because it's the younger generation, it's their vision. We've done a lot of work during my time, and now my hope is to encourage them to continue that work.
Lovely. Um, the previous answer was just so spot on, and I'm so glad you went there. I also have a book coming out next year called The Chief Storytelling Officer, and we talk a lot about what you just said. I get really frustrated when people treat like doing good things, as you said, as like a separate thing, like a PR stunt almost, right? Like, hey guys, we made a ton of money last year, but let's make sure we give back. I think you also said performative, which is spot on. And this book talks about like the why, like the ROI behind like doing good things and leading with values, because often they're viewed as, perhaps mutually exclusive or an add-on or something like that. And I think you said this in different words, but the value or the ROI that I clearly see is sustainable, long-term growth because of these partnerships, because of these collaborations, because you're able to adapt and evolve. So it's really that longevity in your brand comes from these partnerships, which is a word that you use a lot. And I want to dive into that next. When you talk about what might be which might be clients to some people, you call them partners, it seems. Is that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. We refer to client partners and partners. Yeah.
So talk to me about why that's exactly what it is, not a vendor and a contractor, but an actual partnership, a collaboration between these two, and why that yields the best results to view it in that manner.
I think the easiest way to refer to it, and I think this is what you're alluding to in your book, which I'm excited to read. So again, Chief Storytelling Officer next year. Excited to check that out. Is that a lot of business, but I would say even in nonprofits, a lot of our relationships have really focused on transactional models, right? That this is a quid pro quo. This is a purchase. It's a very and what I'm interested in is something a bit more authentic and meaningful than that. And that's why we think of it as partnership. We want a shared success model. And that goes for the way businesses work, nonprofits work, that I think there is sometimes for sake of convenience. So I don't want to ignore that that's part of it. There's reasons. If you are, for example, a really motivated activist, you might start an organization and you're like, I know what I want to do, and have a lived experience here, and I want to be able to do this. And 100%, I understand it. But it has a ceiling, because once that lived experience only gets so far, and if people can't see themselves invested in it, then in some ways that's where we end up turning to conversations about transactional. We turn to the Sally Struthers, the 25 cents a day, the Sarah McLachlan Angel song. We turn essentially to sympathy and pity models, right? In order to do this transactional, because what I'm looking for is a funding stream that's based on your guilt, right? Which is not your investment. It's also disempowering for the individuals that we're speaking of.
100%.
It does enormous damage in the long term to what we think is possible in transformational change, because we don't see the people as people. We see people as essentially a source of pity. We see them as something else, right? And dehumanizing is very much the sort of poison in the well of the current moment, is that dehumanization. I'm interested in bringing humanity back into the conversation. And that is really, to me, the focus of it, is that we're looking for meaningful and authentic engagement. So one reason I started, and in the beginning, as I always thought of it as partnership, is that it is partnership. Like I want to see, and I've said this before, I want to see you succeed, not just because it's a proof of concept around my model, right? That I'm able to deliver that for our clients, but I actually care what the outcome is. I care that you're doing this for climate change. I care that you're doing this in racial justice. I care that you're doing this in queer liberation, reproductive justice, whatever the case may be. Like, we wouldn't take you on, honestly, when we have like gotten rid of clients over times too, or we said no, if it's just not an alignment for us. Like, if you're not really fitting the model that we want to see successful, then I don't want my team to work on that either. I want us to go to work and feel good about what we do every day. I mean, I would say there's probably some clients we're kind of ambivalent about, like, good or not, like, maybe the
job. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, or at least the people in the team understand us. We support them. We love working with them. They're collaborative.
Yeah.
We certainly, so again, it's a good business. So we have to make sure we have a good model there. But it is a case where the team and I talk, and we're like, how do you feel being in his meetings? How do you feel being treated? How do you see other people being treated? Is this in alignment for us? Or do we need to look at phasing phasing out or phasing differently. And that is really important to me. But I want to come back to one other thing you said that is really important around storytelling, because I also think there's a mythology that, and it's kind of an antiquated mythology, that we get to control the story all the time. And I think the reality is what we're doing ideally, and I don't get to control my puppy who's decided.
Oh, you're fine.
For a minute.
The more the merrier.
I have two puppies. So yeah, pup dad. And so we don't control that narrative all the time. And in fact, in this mediated environment, like hyper-mediated environment and diverse mediated environment, we'll never control the media in the way, in the narrative in the way that we want to, because, again, we've democratized it, which is wonderful. It's a beautiful opportunity. It opens up a lot of opportunity for, again, community-led solutions, which is what we focus on. But it means that as an organization where you used to be able to throw out a message and maybe if you paid enough and got it through enough channels, then people would sort of buy it. But in these spaces, that's a lot harder to do. Most people are going to control it. So we, for example, have a brand advocacy map that we have, a story map that you can download from our site. You can get that at thegreatidea.com/insights. And it's a brand story advocacy map. And what it does is it says, here's what our brand story is at the center, but then how are these other communities invested in it? So this is what I mean by that partnership, is that they're actually going to control the narrative, and not just your direct, the people who are directly involved. So, if you're an organization, you have your staff, your team members, you have your internal and your external stakeholders. But your external stakeholders also include people who are family members of your staff. They also include community members who are in your town and hear about you, right? So they're all going to have stories about you. And what you want to do is, how do I bring tools to my advocates to help them share the story that we want to encourage, that we want to make part of that? And then how am I tuning into hearing back that feedback and understanding to make sure that as a brand, I'm attentive to it? Because sometimes, again, brands get very insular and they're like, people think of us as the people who do X and Y thing. That's not always true. We do a lot of community forums, a lot of conversations with people, and we're like, this is actually, like, people remember what you did 10 years ago and they haven't forgotten about X and Y thing. Or this happened 15 years ago with an organization with a totally separate name, but they think of it as you. Like, these are things that we try to pay attention to, this feedback that actually sits outside of it, because those are community-led stories. And our goal is to make sure that we are encouraging communities to be part of those conversations, to shape them and build something that feels, again, authentic and meaningful.
I think I understand how you use this term, but I just want to clearly define it. You keep referring to advocates, and the book is The Advocate Advantage, right? And when you reached out to me, we talked about the brand story advocacy building. Let's define that for folks. So we talked about what a partner is and the way you view it. What exactly is a brand story advocate?
A brand story advocate is somebody who has put stake in their own biography in your success and your story. In other words, they've incorporated in their own internal biography. So, for example, I can be a consumer of something. Like, I'm a consumer of, I'm a consumer of a Pop-Tart. Sure, we'll go to Pop-Tart, right?
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? My story of my high school years.
Now they have protein Pop-Tarts, by the way.
They can throw protein powder in anything. It's going to be there we go. I'm waiting for the protein, like, what is it? The little Easter chicks, those little Easter little peeps, protein peeps. Oh, by the way, if anybody does that, I want a piece of that right now. I just want a piece of that right now. You heard it here first. The protein peep, all this guy,
Oh my God.
Gonna own it. But, like, I'm a consumer. I have no stake in it. Like, I'm not, honestly, like, when, I think about it, if I go for a generic one or not a generic one, I'm not, I recognize the brand because they spent a lot of money pummeling that into my brain. But, I'm not so, I will buy the generic one because I know it's made at the same factory and they just do a different box on it. Right. So it's not that interesting to me. But if you ask me about other parts of my life or other things that I purchase or places I go, for example, to buy my records, things like that, I will make my choices because I'm like, oh, I like this company. I like what they do. I follow a couple labels that are independent. And so I'm invested in it because I'm a music nerd. So for me, like, it's all the music nerdy stuff. And so I'm invested in it. So when I think about, or even NPR, right? Like, I'm invested in NPR. I think NPR is amazing. And so, like, I think they are a national treasure. And so to me, I am invested. When people talk smack about it, I'm critical. Or when people are like, when it's threatened, I'm there. And you could see that with other people who listen to NPR who recognize it as part of themselves and part of their day. So much so that people put bumper stickers on their car and they will be, and NPR knows that, right? Like they've cultivated that among all of the radio stations and the broadcasting partners to make sure that like they see you, they appreciate you, they know this is why they've been able to pull away from government funding in the same way that, in the way they have. Not enough yet, but we're working on it. We're encouraging more of that to make sure that they are sustainable, that they continue to provide the work that they do. And I see myself in that. So when they get, smack talked about them, I'm like, I'm right there. And I'm like, how dare you? That's me. I'm an advocate. Like I'm invested in it now. And so when I think about building brand advocates, I want organizations and partners and our for-profit partners, I want them to see all of the people who are invested in their success to be seen, to be heard, and to be part of that conversation. And I want to open the door and welcome and invite new people to join that conversation because they see the value in the work and they see value in the services.
Is there a direct way to, this is a bad word or to use, but to accumulate those advocates, or is it just like lead with your values, trust the vision, trust the process, and just be your authentic self as a brand? Or is there a way to kind of encourage? That's a better word.
That's a great question. I mean, obviously, we spent our entire career, this business is built on encouraging people, right, to do that. So part of it is you want to certainly get their attention. So there's standard marketing and sales and storytelling, right? Like we need to be pithy in our storytelling. We need to be poignant in how we're directing people into the conversation. But then we also need to back it up with proof and be able to back it up with consistency and sustain it over periods of time and show that we mean it. And then be aware of the places where it is inconsistent. And one thing we do with our partners is we're like, we see this, we're having this conversation, but we these are places that we feel like are a little bit more vulnerable. We should probably either address them and make sure that if we're talking about pay equity, then make sure that we're reflecting that. If we're talking about this among our work, we're talking about diversity within the work, are we, or are we literally just choosing the one or two people of color in the staff to throw out in front of everything, right? So these are questions that we ask because because it won't take long for somebody to dig into your social media or look at your about page and figure out who you are. So either own it and figure out hey, we are aspiring to be these things and work toward it, which people will get and understand. And again, could join you in that process and invite them to join you in that journey, or you're going to deny it. And then it's just weird.
That's so good. And it leads me to my next question that I already had, which was about the marketing aspect of it. So you have to at some point outwardly share your story, talk about yourself. How do you and your team approach that while still staying true to your values? Does it change the way you market? Does it, do you adjust it at all? Or do you use traditional methods? What impact does your philosophy have on the way you market your business?
And it's a good question, right? We are very conscious about, we don't want to make false statements. Again, we don't do retail. So that is one area we sort of draw some line. We do a lot of education, awareness. We're building up through those channels. And to be honest, again, unless you are competing on a transactional model where you're competing on either price or location, right? And that is becoming a smaller and smaller population that can do that, right? There's basically it's hard for small to mid-sized businesses to be able to compete in that. Then you are competing on your messaging. You are competing on the stories that you're telling, the stories that you're bringing into this space. And so to me, it's I guess in your question, to me, it's very much about just making sure that the stories that we're telling and the direction we're telling it speaks to people in the current moment. And I think being able to do that and channel that. So some of the organizations we have, for example, have 10 to 15 initiatives that they're working on, things that they're addressing across communities. We obviously can't, pummel a population with 10 to 15 messages. I barely remember where I live, I guess, on a given day. So it is hard for people to recall that level. So we have to make choices. We have to be able to narrow in that pool of the story that we want to tell and the timeline and the approach in which we want to tell it. And that will depend on, once we know what that story is, then we'll be able to talk about what sort of media environments we want to be in it, because not all of them are appropriate. Again, a lot of people spend a lot of money on social media. The ROI on that is a little iffy depending on where you are. Again, it's a pay-to-play model, so there's some issues there. But a lot of people think like, hey, if I keep throwing stuff at social media, that'll make a big difference. It can't on its own. And so you have to really think strategically about how you do it in, like we talked about earlier, in collaboration with other media channels. So in thinking about how we deploy the brand and how we bring it into a space where we get more people involved, it's thinking really about how we make those things kind of consistently share the same story, and how they do it across these different media. And that to me is the fun part. I love that. I don't think of it as marketing in the same classical sense of buy something, because I've been such a content marketing person my entire life. It has always been built on this idea about what is the story we want to tell, and how do we want to engage people in being invested in that story.
Well said. I know one of the things that you create is the podcast. What are your thoughts, and why do you invest the time in creating original content like that?
Oh, I see. This is for one of the joys. And this is something I think about as a small business. So thank you for that question. It's a joy to be able to have the resources, skill sets, community around, to channel that into sometimes filling spaces that either other organizations or other companies aren't in.
Right.
To do work that we believe is integral to our value system. So things that we believe, we have 4 core values that we kind of live in, and they're part of our work. We, as a team meeting, we repeat them every week when we have our stand-ups, and we really, again, try to center the company into these values. And so being able to do initiatives like, awareness initiatives like the Out.Vote, which is trying to get queer people to vote, our Freedom for Everybody initiative, Pride is for Everybody and Freedom for Everybody initiative are really about trying to draw attention to attacks on bodily autonomy. That includes, again, rights for trans people, reproductive justice, and then queer liberation, and kind of thinking of those as one piece. And then the Power Beyond Pride podcast is another example of that, which is a podcast where, in looking at doing a podcast, and I'm a big podcast fan, I've been on, I'm grateful to be on yours. I'm grateful to have experienced many of that over the years. But I felt like what was missing was a conversation around what it meant to be an activist and elevate that change-making approach for queer people. And why that's really important in the current moment is all the assaults and the attacks on our just vast and beautiful spectrum of individuals, and that what make up the rich fabric of the queer communities is just something that I've been very proud to be part of and proud to be engaged in. And then also realizing that what makes the queerness amazing is its multiplicity. And so we actually structure the podcast. We have 8 co-hosts, which is amazing, which sounds like a lot. I know you're like, oh my gosh, that one person, this is a lot. But they cycle, so we have 2 different co-hosts, 2 co-hosts per guest interview, and then once a month we do a reply all, where we have 3 to 4 of our co-hosts come together and just talk about stuff in the headlines. And so it's done in such a way as to be both sustainable, but also represent our queer diaspora in a way that's meaningful. Yeah. And so I love it. And to me, to have a company where we have said at the beginning, our principle that 5% of what we do goes toward these initiatives, like, again, sponsoring queer pride, sponsoring Black sexual health conferences, things that, especially community-driven stuff, like grassroots-oriented stuff, we've been approached, and some stuff we don't even talk about, where people approach us for funds and they're like, hey, I want to start a chapbook or a literary piece. There's no funding for this. And I was like, well, here, we'll do it. Well, and you don't even need to thank us for it. But I was an activist. Like, to be able to do that, when I used to have to scramble to figure out a $500 grant, like, that was, I remember as an activist, like, I'd write these things and I need all this different stuff just to get $500 to do something that was, like, obviously important to do and was community led. And to be able to do that as a business and be like, this fulfills who we are and who we are. And I want that to be at the center of again, what we do as a business. And to me, that carries out into the work we do with our partner clients, in our client partners, because we also understand that they need to be, in many ways, responsive to and inclusive of the communities who are within and outside of their operations. Like, they need to be in that conversation, and we want to make that integral to who we are.
This reminds me, when I was researching for the book, this reminds me a lot of, there was a moment in Patagonia's journey where they had to change their vision. It was way too not esoteric necessarily, but just like complicated, complex, didn't make any sense, a lot of jargon. And they changed it to, we're in business to save our home planet. So every action that we do leads back up to that. And so it sounds like, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it sounds like you're not doing things like the podcast to bring in more business, but rather we're in business to do things and affect change like we hope to on the show, for example. Is that fair to say? That's what it feels like.
I want to believe it's both and, right? Like,
That's a
I
good
want to
point.
believe this is part of the reason I think about when I approach for-profit businesses, is that there are ways to do both in a meaningful and authentic way. Like, you don't have to, I think oftentimes, like you alluded to earlier, is that in order to do good business, like the good stuff that, makes me a better citizen, makes me a better person in my community. That stuff, that's if I get an opportunity to do it. And I want more people to think about, how do we center being the people we want to be and build the businesses out from that, and start to think about, like, all right, well, again, it has to be a smart business model. It has to be an effective business model. This is one of the, this is where I think economic justice conversations are valid and valuable. We're thinking about tax programs that don't penalize people in middle and lower incomes of low resource communities is important. All of these things are incredibly valuable and important part of the conversations. And we should all be invested in them. I don't care what your level of wealth is. Like, if you want to live in a world in which the people you are around are in healthy spaces, are in good spaces, and you want to see things like crime reduced and, I don't know, the quality of your latte improve, then, whatever it is, right? Like, Elizabeth Warren was very poignant in these conversations. And again, I think her path is really fascinating to me as a politician, because she was technically very conservative. And then the more she began to understand, or not understand is the wrong word, but the more she began to appreciate what it meant to look at economic models from a very human-centered point, she began to think, well, this system isn't always built for people to succeed. And I think if we start thinking of our businesses and again, a more conscious version of capitalism, I think we can create a system that is better and stronger and be open to opportunities for real transformative change. I think that's possible. I think it's likely. There are models where that happens, and I think we can do it. But it is going to take not just one, not just two. It really takes a collective conversation about what that means and at what levels we're willing to invest. And that's really what, again, brand storytelling, bring it back to brand storytelling. That's what brand storytelling is. Brand storytelling is not just the communication of that story. It is a person investing in that story, whether they are imagining themselves in that story, whether they are participating in the construction, the journey of that story. But that is, to me, what that successful brand storytelling is when people are invested, when they say, like, your success is a shared success. It's a shared success with me.
Absolutely. Oh, I can't wait for you to read this book. I wish I'd interviewed you before. So many of these points are what I'm like fascinated with in this very moment. Appreciate you so much. If you're going to continue this agency for another 10 years, and you might have personal reasons at some point in that journey where you decide not to, of course, but if you were...
Oh, heck no, I love it. I love it. All right. I'm so proud of our 10 years. We commissioned a song, so you can go download the free song for our 10 years. There's a house mix, and you can get it on all the streaming channels. It's a bop. William Neesmith is an amazing artist. We worked with William. It's great. We Are Great Ideas, the name of the song, and it is so fun. And you can, again, just joy. Which I just want to put that word out there. Okay,
no, that's
continue on. But like, I hope for another 20 years.
Okay, so what do you plan to focus on? What do you need to focus on? What needs to evolve for you to be able to accomplish that in your mind in this moment?
I think that's a great question, because there's so much uncertainty. I think that between the executive administration's damage to institutions that have taken decades to get to, and again, I certainly welcome critique of some of the institutions that have been built over the last, let's say, 50, 60, 70 years.
That's fair.
That is, again, I think that they sometimes are Band-Aids, sometimes we're just resolving a particular challenge. But there are people whose lives and well-being rely on those institutions, and to dismantle them without the consideration of that is fundamentally cruel and inhumane. And so as a business, businesses and creators, independents, whether you're a solopreneur, wherever you are, as long as you are employed within this sort of economy, the unpredictability is just this miasmic haze of tension that lives through everything. And I think that is the biggest thing I think we're navigating right now, from whether it's people who want to donate or invest, financially into projects, whether they can volunteer, whether organizations can look forward, all of these things, all this uncertainty, unpredictability. Now, I love the option to make it transformational change in the future of what people are working toward. That would be amazing. I would like us to get together to think about, well, what do we want to build? But we'd have to have the power and the ability and the time to do that. And so I think about the next 10 years of the work that we do in terms of advocacy building as trying to pull people into the same room collaboratively on imagining and putting into place transformational processes and practices that make the best of some of the magic that was created over the last several decades that we want to sort of bring back. Again, I think important things like research, medical research, things like that we need to have, but maybe envision something better for the places we weren't, the places that we didn't address around racial equity, around inclusive practices, around the ways we think about parenting and workplaces. I'm hoping that what we can build is something even better. And that's the thing I'm trying to live into in the current moment, is look at not only resolving or addressing some of the cruelties that are going to be over the next year to 2 years, and making sure that we, maybe longer, I hope not, that are going to be in the water and going to be in the world, but also giving us an opportunity and encourage us to think about what is also possible if indeed they have, removed, let's say, housing practices that have been reliant on many communities. Are there ways for us to come together as a community, just as people did in the marches, just as people are doing in other ways, to envision a housing system that is community-led, is community-built? Because I think organizations are doing that, but they've always been up against these sort of walls of some of the institutions. And perhaps, and by no means do I think there's a lot of silver linings here. There's a lot of damage. But I do think one of the silver linings may be, if we come out of it and think that we can be better than this, and I believe we can be better than this current moment, is build something better. And that is what I'm certainly hoping and encouraging and trying to work with our organizations to do.
That is a perfect stamp on today's conversation. Shane, I appreciate you being here so much. I'm so glad we made it happen. I'm honestly so glad that we're still connected. It had been a while since we talked, and I'm really glad that you reached out and that we did this.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the work you do. Again, elevating storytelling is critical, but storytelling in so many ways. I'm always impressed by the way you share that throughout all people's journeys, that every individual has stories to tell. And we are better off with the more stories that we are shared in the world, because it gives us a much bigger landscape. I get excited because it just deepens and widens the world every time I get encounter stories.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being such a vanguard and advocate, if I may.
Yeah, maybe. Absolutely. Well, I mean, honestly, that's why one of the reasons I was excited to talk to you, because I always like to look at the world of storytelling through unique lenses. And so I'm sure we've had some people, we've had storyboard artists on here and stuff, but I really love the design of storytelling, kind of lens that we approach this conversation through. So absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. I'm trying to fight the good fight too. I totally agree. The more stories we share, the more opportunity we have to heal, to grow, to evolve, to connect, to collaborate. There's a lot of beauty in it. So let's keep it up.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share this time with you.
Absolutely. And I'm also looking forward to your book, my friend.
Thank you so much. We should do a reading. We'll find some book of that.
Yeah, we should talk about that. We're here in the same town. We should do something when they come out. So let's continue that conversation.
I love that. We'll continue that.
Well,
thanks,
buddy.
Enjoyed it.
My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab. I actually like the way that last one ended a lot. That's what helps us grow, and that's what helps you grow, and that's what we're here to do. That's cool. I dig that. So